Hey folks, it is January 6th and it is a day to be mournful and sad and frustrated and also joyful, depending on the situation. What I'm talking about is the exposure of the January 6th hoax being exposed. That is probably the best thing that I can say about today is after 3 years of lies and bullshit and prosecutions and people being wrongly accused and people lying, we are finally getting to the bottom of this can of worms. Actually, we're just getting to the top of the can, but the can of worms is now open. And people like Adam Schiff hopefully will go to prison behind this. A lot of the cops that lied about the J6ers and caused them to catch serious charges, including real jail time, long-term sentences. Hopefully all that will get straightened out with the people that have falsely accused sent to prison for the way they have handled themselves. Just my opinion, folks, but this shit needs to be resolved. It probably won't happen before 2024, but a lot of this stuff is coming out of the woodworks in such a way that there's no way mainstream media can hide all this. That we now have people that were pushed off balconies, and the mother of Ashley Babbitt and several people are suing the federal government for the way they were treated on January 6th with the extreme violence perpetrated by the J6 DC cops. And so it is now starting to backfire. They're starting to be able to recognize there's two sides to every story, not just the mainstream media narrative that we've been pumped for 3 years. I've got several clips here that I cut up. I do hope people appreciate the fact that it takes me forever to do it this way, but I was watching Benny Johnson earlier and Dan Bongino and Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson had an interview with Captain Clay Higgins, who is one of our great representatives in the House. He is probably top 5 or top 10 as far as I'm concerned, as far as good guys on the MAGA First agenda, people that actually want the best thing for this country each and every day. And so I always like to bring you anything I can from Captain Clay Higgins. But truth be known, there are so many things about January 6th that I could talk about today, discuss the hypocrisy, the lies, the fact that the Democrats are getting caught up in this mess, behind the fact that a lot of them just blatantly falsified information at the least. But like I said, I've got about 10 or 15 little short clips here. I'm going to go with about 10. And these are things that were said by Clay Higgins when interviewed by Tucker Carlson. And these are just some exposing the truth kind of moments. I'm talking about some things we didn't know. I'm talking about information like 200 plus feds, estimated 200 plus feds involved in the insurrection, pregame to what was really going on, and the fact of the matter that there was feds inside the building in MAGA gear in order to help people know where to go. That's what's coming up, folks. Stick around. This video is going to be a little bit longer than usual. Not that I don't do short video, not that I don't do long videos, but got lots of little clips here for you folks. If you want to go watch the entire interview of Clay Higgins with Tucker Carlson, it's on X, otherwise known as Twitter. Tucker Carlson, I think it's called Tucker Carlson Encounters on the Tucker Carlson Network. And it's about 45 minutes of just some mind-blowing stuff. But if you just stick around a little bit longer, I'll show you the highlights of everything I learned watching this entire take. Here we go, folks. Here we go with a little bit of Tucker Carlson and what he thinks about the situation before he gets really into the interview of Clay Higgins.
Largest law enforcement mobilization in the history of the United States. That was obviously disproportionate because it wasn't the worst riot that year, not even close. But the day itself, there was something about January 6th that didn't feel right. And hovering over that day has remained the question, to what extent was it a setup? And we still don't really know. But what's
certain actors, and you could say deep state actors within the federal government, to set the stage for what happened in J4, 5, and 6, and to entrap thousands of Americans from across the country and lure them into this set stage on J4, 5, and 6. The people that were involved in that is quite a large web. So yes, sir, we do have a great deal of evidence compiled, and we're gradually, professionally rolling that evidence out.
So you sort of answered the question right there in larger terms. You just said that elements within the federal government, I assume law enforcement, intel, and military, and I'm using your words, lured Americans to Washington into what you called a trap.
Yes, sir.
Damn.
So that would, I mean, that's a shocking, and I assume that's a sober conclusion based on the evidence. That's what you're saying.
That would be my sober assessment as an investigator, and I love my country, and I've always been a staunch defender of the thin blue line.
It's a setup, folks. Clay Higgins just blew the fucking lid off the whole can of worms. It's a setup. It's a setup. Clay Higgins has seen the proof. Listen to what he just said. If you got to replay that clip of the video, folks, he knows just from the evidence he's seen how this thing's been orchestrated, between the video footage, between the detailed documentation, between the timeline, how things rolled out, how things were prevented, how Trump was enabled from getting real security at the Capitol beforehand. All the white buses, the indiscriminate white buses, the people walking into the office buildings in the Capitol and coming out as going in as feds and coming out as Trump supporters. Trump supporters being alias Trump, or supposed Trump supporters being implanted inside the Capitol before the breach happened. It was all a setup, folks. The more you stick around to this video, the more you'll find out just how much truth there is to the speculation.
And I would proudly count the FBI amongst that number. They're like brothers to me. So to find that level of conspiratorial corruption at the highest levels of the FBI has been very troubling to me as a man, as a cop. And yet, you follow the evidence wherever it leads. And
yes,
this is what investigators do. So when I asked Christopher Wray that question, for instance, I already knew the answer. I had reviewed compelling evidence that the FBI had assets, human assets, dressed as Trump supporters inside the Capitol prior to the doors being open and the masses allowed in.
That's damning evidence all by itself. Just that one fact alone, folks, tells a huge story about the fact that they had to have known this was going to happen, had to have planned it, had to have planted the seeds, had to have had informants in the crowd, had to have wanted this to happen. And that is the real truth that is coming out at this point in time, folks. Stick around, like I said, lots of clips here. This is nothing but damning evidence, and you can go check out the entire video if you so choose over on Tucker.
We remember exactly what took place, that this was no tourist visit.
Know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
I'm going to punch him out, and I'm going to go to jail, and I'm going to be happy.
I was murdered.
You were murdered. Okay, you obviously weren't murdered because you're alive and you're basically intact. You weren't murdered, buddy.
And they are lying. And we know that because we've been looking at the tape. There were FBI assets dressed as Trump supporters within the Capitol. So that is proof of entrapment because, of course, the federal government could have prevented entry into the Capitol building. There aren't that many doors. You work there, you know. But they allowed people in on purpose to entrap them. That's what that proves, I think. Does it not?
Well, it's certainly condemning. It's another piece of the strategy that the government employed to sort of complete the entrapment. of Americans that they had infiltrated and then prodded and provoked with online with those original seeds
Yeah.
planted of actions like what type of gear to wear and just in language that incited behavior that could go the wrong way. Pushing actions.
You know, I saved this little this part of this clip for a particular reason. Is because the entrapment clause of how this thing went down was pre-planned, preordained by the federal government in order to smear Trump supporters, destroy the MAGA party, to lock people up so they would never question elections again. There was a lot to prevent Trump from ever being on the ballot again, to attempt to lock Trump up. There were so many different possibilities that the left knew that they could poke and prod and probably get away with a lot of if they just made this go down just the right way. And they did a pretty good job, I'm being honest with you. They did a pretty good job of making it look like Trump supporters stormed the Capitol. But in reality, I see maybe a few idiot Trump supporters storm the Capitol, but for the most part, if there was 200 feds there pretending to be Trump supporters, acting like fools, maybe it wasn't Trump supporters at all. Maybe it was just people that were playing follow the leader into the building once the officers allowed them to go in and ushered them through and showed them how to get from point A to point B. Speaking of point A to point B, I think the next part of this clip here is where Clay Higgins really gets into explaining how the average Joe could not find their way around the Capitol. And so therefore maybe some of these Trump supporters that were planted inside the Capitol for the breach were there as tour guides so people could figure out where to go for the best camera optics for future prosecution and things of that nature.
Of legal and legitimate peaceful protests to an edge where those Americans would likely not have gone had they not been encouraged by the FBI plant amongst their number that they didn't know was there. So by the time it was actually J6 and you had masses of Americans assembled outside the Capitol, almost like 99.9%, 100% peaceful. On the inside, you had FBI assets dressed as Trump supporters that knew their way around the Capitol.
Before the doors even open.
Before the doors open. Or else how are you going to get around the Capitol? You've been there many times. You need a guide to get from
folks,
whatever door you go in.
It's a labyrinth.
It's a maze inside there. So that's right. So there's no way, just Americans, most of which have never been to the Capitol, there's no way they can come in some random door that gets opened and then get their way directly to the statuary or the House chamber or the Senate chamber. It's just not possible. So the FBI assets that were dressed as Trump supporters that were inside the Capitol were there, I believe, and evidence indicates that they were there to specifically wave in the Trump supporters that had gathered outside the Capitol, and the doors open and they were allowed in.
I believe that's
on
the
the
truth.
inside were there's some more Trump supporters, but really those were FBI assets, law enforcement assets that knew their way around the Capitol, and they.
Damn, folks. One more piece of the puzzle. The Capitol had feds looking like Trump supporters planted on the inside, not only to probably open the doors, but to act as tour guides to make sure people got to the most specific places to where it looked like they were surrounding the congressional chamber, able to find the Senate chamber, able to get close enough to the politicians that they felt like there was a threat. Like he said, the White House, both of them said the White House is like a maze. I picture the inside of the White House like a submarine or a battleship, where you've got several levels, several story buildings, several levels, several staircases, several hallways, and hundreds of doors. And if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there the fast way if you find your way at all. And I believe that is the truth of the matter as far as the Capitol, because it is such a monstrous complex. It is not.
And the DOJ and the deep state actors knew would be the most sort of condemning criminal action of Americans being inside the Capitol, protesting without permit and things. So they knew they were setting the stage for arrest and prosecution.
It's such a crime. Who planned this, do you think?
Well, I think factions planned this. I wouldn't say who, Tucker, because I don't think there was one person that planned this, but I believe the faction of establishment liberals within the FBI and the Democrat Party and our intelligence services to another extent use their massive powers of surveillance and investigative assets that they have across the country, confidential informants, registered informants, non-registered informants, voluntary informants. It's a complex web of FBI assets across the country that can be activated. So if you have authority at some of the highest levels in the FBI, it doesn't take much. The faction within the FBI and within our intelligence services that would coordinate with the most extreme liberal factions within the Democrat Party that were desperate to keep Trump out of office and worked within the theater of operations, shall we say, that had been set by the COVID alleged medical emergencies. Americans that were identified as Trump supporters. I mean, their objective was to destroy the entire MAGA movement, to forever stain the patriotic fervor that was associated with the America First MAGA movement.
There it is.
Won in 2016, and we believe won again in 2020. And the establishment,
that's right,
on both sides, of both major parties, were determined to smash that out of existence, not just by defeating Trump, but by destroying the reputations of the movement itself, by creating this narrative that was totally false, but was heavily pushed, that MAGA Republicans, America First Republicans, are somehow a danger to our republic and
a threat to democracy, folks. We heard that just earlier today. If you watch news anywhere in the nation, you probably heard the word threat to democracy on the news. It's a fact, folks. There is a narrative out there they're trying to push to destroy this country, and it's not working as far as I can tell. But they're not going to give up. They're relentless in their attempt to make Trump out to be Confederate dictator, Mussolini, Hitler type. I believe the final attempt to vilify Trump will be they will call him the third Antichrist. That will be the final result. Just kind of calling it in advance. The only thing I can think of worse than Hitler and Mussolini and some of these other horrible dictators of our past would be the Antichrist. So maybe I'm wrong, but if they start calling him the Antichrist on MSNBC and CNN, remember, you heard it here first.
As any control of the FBI, you're describing a government within a government.
That's right.
Well, in America, a question becomes reasonable men would ask when we face a crisis like this, who investigates the investigator?
Right.
And the answer in America is Congress. So we have the responsibility to investigate through the appropriate committees, which we're certainly doing that now that we have a Republican majority and control of the committees. But we don't have the power to arrest. We can
right.
give criminal
That's the problem.
referrals based upon our investigative efforts, but we have to have a DOJ that's receptive to the criminal referrals.
And that's the huge problem that we have right now in a nutshell. The Congress can prove Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, the entire Biden family, Obama, Adam Schiff. They can prove the lies, the corruption, the treason, the things that we will be finding out in the next 6 months or a year between the lies, the hoaxes, the truth coming out behind real journalism, and the fact that everything in darkness must come to light. Exposure is happening, folks, but as far as and transparency is on the horizon. But as far as prosecution, zero chance we'll get anybody of any consequence of the Democratic nature, a Democrat Party, arrested, locked up, prosecuted for any crimes at this point, because the Department of Justice has been weaponized, not just against conservatives, but been weaponized to protect the Democrats in the name of democracy. And so, like Clay Higgins says, is no matter what we prove between now and next year, we're not going to get any resolution when it comes to putting the cuffs on these idiots. Got one more little clip for you here, folks. Hopefully this has been totally informative. I thought this was an amazing interview. If you think so as well, give me a thumbs up, like, subscribe, and share if you haven't already. If you're on Twitter, share it over to your Twitter channel. If you're over on Rumble, share it over to your Rumble channel. Doesn't hurt to spread the message here. Just to let people know that people like Tucker Carlson, Clay Higgins, Benny Johnson, myself, we're all just trying to do the right thing and let the American people know that January 6th was a hoax. People are still being prosecuted for it still today. The truth needs to come out, and people need to be held accountable for their actions that day. And I'm not talking about the people that are locked up in the cages behind the governmental allegations. I'm talking about the people that lied, that put a lot of those people under the spotlight, including Donald Trump. All right, folks, I got one more little clip, like I said, here for you, and then I'll jump out of here. But wow,
A little
what an interview.
surprised, and don't expect you to be critical of your colleagues in the Republican conference, but I mean, they do control the House. Impeachment is a thing. Chris Wray is still the FBI director. I watched Republicans, some of whom I know, cheer the murder of Ashley Babbitt, who was an unarmed woman, less than 5'5", by Michael Byrd. They were on Michael Byrd's side. And I have to say, for a lot of Republican voters, and I count myself among them, very clarifying. If you're cheering Ashley Babbitt's murder, shooting women now, that's okay because she likes Trump. And there were Republicans who were like, yeah, I was happy. Like, a lot of them thought that. What the hell?
Yeah, that was.
What the hell?
And it made me sick.
Me too.
You know, there's a great responsibility when you wear a badge in America. I mean, think about it. To be the designated servant of your community that has the authority to deny the freedom of a fellow American in the land of the free. Like, there's a heavy responsibility. So
absolutely,
the escalation of force it must be appropriate in order to effect a lawful arrest. And And a bad shoot is the worst thing that an officer can possibly be involved in his career. You know, it's the thing of nightmares for good police officers. So to take from a law enforcement perspective was clearly a bad shoot, because there's some basic rules you just cannot violate. You have to attempt to effect an arrest before you can go to deadly force. There was no attempt to arrest Ashley Babbitt. There were officers on the other side of the window she was climbing through. There were officers on the interior side of the window she was climbing through. There was no indication this had been going on for an hour, and there was no reports on the radio or anywhere else of gunfights. So there was no reason at that point to expect that Ashley Babbitt or anybody else in the crowd was going to produce a firearm and start firing on police officers. Why?
No, folks, that is the most heart-wrenching thing about this whole situation. I mean, it's pretty bad that a good percentage of the country paints half of the country as crazies because of the rhetoric of the Democrat Party behind what happened on January 6th. That's bad enough. But the fact of the matter that innocent people that just walked in the Capitol, people that were just there that day, were assaulted, were assaulting each other. I'm not speaking up for the people that were violent that day, whether they were cops or just protesters. The truth be known, there was a lot of victims that day. A lot of those victims are in jail right now. And all this stuff needs to be vindicated, not vilified. And we need to get to the transparent truth, so people don't have to do undo unjust servitude to the system. That is because they're Trump supporters, attempting to hold them in prison for decades, a lot of them, just for entering the Capitol building. To me, I would think that would be a trespassing charge at most, but on Capitol grounds, trespassing charge at this point looks like it holds a forever charge. And that's just a sad situation of who we've got running the country at the moment. But I do believe 2024, we will take our country back. 1 year from today, Trump will be back in office. And what he will probably do 1 year from today, January 6th, I have to believe, if not by the end of January, he will start beginning the pardoning process of everybody involved on that day as a protester. So that is what I got to look forward to. Not that it is any better for the people that still have to suffer through this for another solid year, or the people that have lost people like Ashley Babbitt's family. But truth be known, I think people like Clay Higgins coming on top of Carlson today will make a difference. So please share this video if you stick around to this point in the video. Please just encourage people to know the truth and not believe the mainstream media soundbite short clips, which are mostly propaganda and lies. Like, subscribe, and share to What a Patriots. That's all I got for you. Everybody have a great day. Over and out.